The week that changed everything began with the sound of waves I thought I'd long grown indifferent to. I arrived at the rental house late in the afternoon, dragging my suitcase across the uneven wooden deck, breathing in air that was thick with the scent of salt and distant blooming grass. There was a familiar sense of resignation in the way I unpacked, as if I already knew this trip would pass quietly, just another pause between the bookends of an ordinary life. I was tired, but not unhappy, ready for the simple pleasures of sun, water, shared meals, and lazy evenings. I didn't expect anything to shift, least of all inside myself. We were a small group, my best friend, his younger sister, a couple of our mutual friends, all relaxed and hungry for rest. That first evening, I watched as laughter moved easily between them, the kind of lightness I remembered from years ago, but rarely felt anymore. I let myself settle into the background, a glass of wine in hand, content to observe rather than participate. But there was something about his sister that kept drawing my attention. She was younger by a decade, her energy bright and uncontained, always in motion. She moved with a confidence that felt almost reckless, walking barefoot across the deck, hair tangled by the breeze, her voice carrying in bursts of laughter that seemed to linger in the air even after she fell silent. I told myself my interest was natural. She was the life of the group, the person everyone gravitated toward. But I noticed myself watching her more than the others. The curve of her neck when she tilted her head back to laugh, the careless way she draped a towel over her shoulders, the flashes of skin where her sundress slipped against her hip. I studied her without meaning to, cataloging gestures and glances, the way her eyes sometimes caught mine and held a beat too long. It felt both innocent and dangerous, a sensation I had not allowed myself in years. Each day followed a rhythm that seemed to erase time. Slow breakfasts on the patio, hours spent floating in warm water or stretched out under the sun. I swam far out from shore, letting the ocean carry me, letting it wash away the sharp edges of thought. On shore, she would wave or call out, her presence a buoy on the horizon of my awareness. There was something electric in the way she existed in the world, a freedom I envied without fully understanding. Sometimes I would turn a page in my book only to realize I'd been watching her for minutes, tracking her movements as if they contained a secret meant only for me. I tried to explain my distraction as mere curiosity, but there was a quickening inside me that I couldn't ignore. Every accidental touch, every brush of her shoulder against mine at the dinner table, every smile that lingered as dusk settled over the house seemed to land deeper than it should have. I told myself I was just tired, just grateful for company, just caught up in the spell of summer, but I knew better. I felt the contours of my life shifting, the careful boundaries I'd built starting to bend beneath a tide I hadn't seen coming. That first night, after everyone drifted off to bed, I sat alone on the balcony, the hum of crickets rising up from the dunes. I watched the moon hang low over the water and tried to steady the pulse of my thoughts. I remembered her laughter, the glow of her skin in the lamplight, the casual way she'd brushed my hand when passing the wine. I didn't know what it meant, only that I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years, the familiar world suddenly electric with possibility and risk. That was the wave, silent at first, then insistent, swelling beneath the surface, threatening to wash away everything I thought I knew about myself. The days began to blend together in a haze of sun and sea breeze, but my awareness of her grew sharper with every passing hour. It was as if some invisible thread had connected us, pulling me closer to her orbit in ways I couldn't justify or explain. She gravitated toward me effortlessly, choosing the seat beside me at breakfast, slipping into my shadow as we walked along the shore, laughing at a private joke only we've seemed to share. There was a growing ease in the way our bodies found each other in the small spaces, her knee brushing mine under the table, her arm pressed to my side as we leaned over the railing to watch the surf. Each touch, each moment of accidental closeness set off a silent alarm inside me, a low, persistent ache I pretended not to feel. In the afternoons, the others would retreat indoors for naps or scatter along the dunes, but she and I found ourselves lingering outside. Sometimes we would sit in the shade with our legs outstretched, letting the heat and the slow cadence of the waves lull us into a kind of suspended animation. She would talk about nothing and everything, her voice easy, stories tumbling out of her with a warmth that made me want to listen forever. I watched the way her lips curved around words, the way her eyes lit up with mischief and memory, and I felt myself wanting her attention more and more, greedy for the lightness she brought into the air between us. I began to notice how every detail about her took on a kind of intimacy, the way she shook water from her hair after a swim, the way she tied the strings of her bikini with quick, practiced fingers, the way she threw her head back and closed her eyes to the sun. My thoughts wandered to her at odd moments, lingering over the softness of her skin, the dip of her waist, the strength of her legs as she jogged back up the beach. At night, when I lay awake in my room listening to the quiet house, I felt her presence beside me, ghost-like and persistent, filling the darkness with a warmth that unsettled and comforted me all at once. There was a particular afternoon when we found ourselves alone by the pool. The air was heavy with the scent of sunscreen and warm grass, cicadas buzzing in the background. We sat on the edge, legs dangling in the cool water, bodies angled instinctively toward each other. She reached over to pluck a stray leaf from my shoulder, her touch feather-light, and I felt a shiver run through me as if her fingers had grazed something deep inside. I watched the sunlight play over her damp skin, watched droplets slide down her neck, and realized I was memorizing her, every freckle, every line of muscle, every expression that flickered across her face. In those moments, the world felt reduced to the space between us, a charged silence filled with all the things neither of us dared name. I carried her scent with me after she left, the ghost of her laughter clinging to my skin, the memory of her hand on my arm replaying again and again in my mind. The line between friendship and something more had become impossibly thin, a fragile border I could feel myself teetering on, drawn forward by a force I no longer wanted to resist. Each day made the pull stronger, the ache sweeter, until I no longer recognized the woman I had been before she arrived. That night, the air was heavy with heat, pressing against my skin and filling the small bedroom with a restless energy. Sleep felt distant and impossible, my mind circling endlessly around every moment I had spent with her that day. I could hear the faint crash of waves through the open window, the distant laughter of our friends echoing off the water, but it all seemed muted compared to the vivid pulse of longing that had settled inside me. I lay on the bed, tangled in thin sheets, tracing the lines of my own body as if searching for a way to ground myself in something real, something solid. The memory of her touch lingered, her fingers brushing my arm by the pool, the heat of her thigh pressed against mine at dinner, the way her gaze had locked with mine and held unblinking for one dizzying moment. It was as if the entire day had been building toward this charged, sleepless darkness. I got up and wandered onto the terrace, the tiles cool beneath my bare feet, the night wind swirling around my ankles. The moonlight painted the world in silver, softening the edges of everything, turning the garden and the dunes into gentle shadows. I wrapped my arms around myself, breathing in the smell of salt and night-blooming flowers, and tried to calm the erratic beat of my heart. I felt the urge to move, to do something, but every gesture seemed both too much and not enough. It was then I saw her silhouette at the far end of the terrace, her figure limned by the moon, hair wild and loose, her body outlined in a thin slip of fabric. My breath caught in my throat, heat prickling up my arms and across my chest. She stepped closer, the movement natural and unhurried, and I felt the world shrink to the small space between us. My body moved almost without thought, closing the distance until I could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the subtle tremor in her hands. The silence was thick with anticipation, the night wrapping us in a cocoon that made everything outside this moment seem unreal and far away. Her fingers found mine, cool and sure, and the touch sent a surge of electricity up my arm, making me shiver despite the heat. I reached for her, letting my hand slide over the bare skin of her shoulders, the soft dip of her back, the line of her collarbone. We moved together in slow motion, the world around us disappearing as our bodies pressed close. My lips found the warmth of her neck, tasting salt and sun and something uniquely hers. Her hands roamed my body, mapping out new territory with each caress, coaxing out sounds from my lips I didn't know I could make. I let my fingers explore the length of her spine, the swell of her hip, the tense curve of her thigh, savoring every sigh, every flutter of breath. Our bodies tangled on the lounge chair, limbs interwoven, skin sliding against skin, breath mingling in the dark. I pressed my mouth to her breast, feeling her heart race beneath my lips, my tongue circling her nipple until she arched into me, her hips rising to meet mine. Heat built between us, slow and deliberate, a wave gathering force beneath the surface. She traced patterns across my stomach, her nails grazing sensitive skin, her mouth traveling lower, scattering kisses along the line of my ribs. I gasped as her hand slipped beneath the waistband of my shorts, her fingers finding me already wet, aching, desperate for more. She moved with a confidence that made me tremble, teasing and stroking, drawing pleasure from me with patient skill. I surrendered to her, letting the sensation build, letting my need pull me under. When release finally came, it was sharp and sweet, tearing through me like lightning, leaving me trembling and breathless in her arms. After we lay together in the hush of the night, bodies still joined, skin damp with sweat, her breath warm against my cheek. I traced circles on her back, memorizing the shape of her, the scent, the softness. The moon hung low over us, casting silver shadows across our tangled forms. I felt more alive than I had in years, my heart swollen with a strange, fierce tenderness. The taste of her lingered on my lips, and in the quiet darkness, I knew something fundamental had shifted inside me. I closed my eyes, let her warmth surround me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at home within my own skin. The morning after was gentle, the world outside wrapped in a hazy golden light, the sea whispering beyond the windows. I moved through the kitchen in silence, making coffee as if nothing had changed, but my skin still tingled with the memory of her hands, her mouth, the heat of our bodies fused in darkness. She appeared quietly, barefoot and tousled, her eyes meeting mine with a shy certainty that made my chest tighten. We lingered around the others as if nothing was different, joining in laughter and small talk, but under the table, her knee brushed against mine, sending small jolts of awareness through me. Every shared glance felt loaded with new meaning, as though we were writing a secret language in the air between us. The day stretched long and slow. We all drove into town, wandered through little shops, bought fruit at the market, shared a lazy lunch in the shade of an awning. I watched her move through the crowd, sunlight flickering through her hair, her head thrown back in laughter at something I couldn't quite hear. I felt strangely light, every moment charged with possibility. At the beach later, she ran ahead into the surf, looking back over her shoulder, eyes shining, and I followed, chasing the shimmer of her footprints in the wet sand. Our group dissolved into the rhythm of the afternoon, some sleeping, others reading, but she and I slipped away under the pretense of wanting to walk further down the beach. The sand was cool underfoot, the tide gently reaching for our ankles. She reached for my hand, fingers interlacing with mine, a simple act that felt radical in its honesty. The world around us faded into a blur of wind and salt and the constant pulse of the ocean. We wandered for what felt like hours, talking quietly about nothing and everything, pausing sometimes to collect shells or just stand with our faces tilted to the breeze. I let myself exist in those moments without questions or doubts, letting my thumb trace slow circles over her knuckles, letting her lean into me when the wind picked up. As dusk fell, we sat together in the soft dip between two dunes, watching the horizon melt into layers of gold and lavender. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I felt her breath slow, her body relax against mine. There was no rush, no need to define or explain. The space between us was filled with the hum of cicadas, the whisper of seagrass, and the gentle weight of unspoken promises. I felt her lips brush against my temple, a delicate touch that seemed to echo through my entire body. I closed my eyes, sinking into the comfort of her presence, the quiet certainty of our connection. When we finally made our way back, the lights of the house glimmered ahead, laughter floating out over the sand. She squeezed my hand once before letting go, and I felt the loss of her touch immediately, a faint ache under my ribs. Inside, we resumed our roles, blending in with the easy noise and activity, but every so often I would catch her gaze and feel that secret spark flare again, quick and bright. That night, tangled in sheets scented with salt and sun, I replayed every moment of our walk, every touch, every glance. The secrecy no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a treasure, something wild and beautiful, ours alone, hidden safely within the hush of the coming night. The days that followed moved with a fragile kind of grace, as if we were walking barefoot across a floor of glass, each step filled with possibility and risk. Every morning I woke before the others, lying still beneath the cool sheets, letting the memories of the night replay in slow motion. My body remembered her touch with aching clarity, the gentle pressure of her hand at my waist, the taste of her skin under my tongue, the way her breath would stutter and catch as we moved together in the dark. I held these moments close, storing them in secret corners of my mind, afraid that even the softest whisper might break the spell that had settled over us. She slipped quietly into my routine, her presence seeping into all the unnoticed spaces of my life. I would find her toothbrush beside mine, her sandals abandoned at the back door, a stray sweater tossed over the arm of the sofa. At breakfast, she carved slices of peach and pressed them into my hand, her fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Our friends seemed blissfully unaware, wrapped up in the lazy rhythms of vacation, afternoon drinks, shared crossword puzzles, long naps in the shade. Yet beneath the surface, I felt a tension growing, delicate and persistent, like the hush before a summer storm. With each passing day, our desire became harder to disguise. We grew bolder, stealing kisses behind half-closed doors, fingertips brushing across bare skin when no one was watching. My heart hammered every time she pulled me into a darkened hallway or pressed me against a sun-warmed wall, her mouth hungry and insistent. I craved her in a way that was almost painful, every nerve alive with anticipation, every breath drawn in hope that I might catch a glimpse of her watching me from across the room. Nights blurred into one another, sheets tangled, limbs entwined, our bodies learning and relearning the shape of need. There were moments of fear, too, a sharp flicker of guilt when I saw her brother's face across the table, his eyes lingering a beat too long, his smile faltering when our gazes met. I wondered how much he guessed, if he noticed the new language of glances and silences between his sister and me. I wanted to tell him everything and nothing, to confess and deny in the same breath. The boundaries between loyalty and longing, secrecy and truth, felt thinner every day. I tried to reassure myself that we were careful, that no one saw, but the truth shimmered just beneath the surface, as unstable as sand slipping through my fingers. I watched her move through the world with a kind of fearless abandon, her laughter spilling over into the afternoon sun, her hair wild from the wind, her skin glowing with health and happiness. She made everything feel possible. I wondered what it would be like to live like that all the time, to choose joy over caution, to reach for what I wanted without apology. She showed me new ways to touch, to be touched, to let go. Under her hands, I found a part of myself I had kept locked away for years, a version of me that could exist outside the boundaries of age and habit and fear. Yet always, just as I let myself believe in the illusion of safety, reality intruded. A phone call from home, a reminder of obligations waiting beyond the sanctuary of this place. I caught myself imagining a future that could never exist, letting hope curl around my heart even as I tried to resist it. I memorized everything about her, the birthmark just below her left shoulder blade, the way her eyelashes fluttered when she blinked sleepily in the morning, the precise shape of her mouth as she whispered my name. I wanted to bottle these memories, to keep them safe against the inevitable return to real life, to hold on to the feeling of her body against mine as the days slipped away. We began to count down the hours, a subtle shift in the air signaling that the end was near. I tried to keep my expression bright, laughing at jokes, joining in games and stories, but underneath I was already mourning the loss of something I could barely name. She seemed to sense it too. Her touches became gentler, more lingering, as if trying to imprint herself on my skin. One evening, we found ourselves alone in the garden as dusk settled. Fireflies floated above the grass, and she gathered me into her arms, swaying to a song only we could hear. I let my head fall against her shoulder, closed my eyes and breathed her in, letting the world fall away until there was nothing left but the two of us and the gentle thrum of longing. It would be easy to pretend that this story could go on forever, that love and desire might shelter us from the turning of the world. But even as I surrendered to the sweetness of each moment, I knew that we stood on shifting ground, that the tide would soon come in and erase every footprint we'd left in the sand. Still, I clung to her, to the hope that this time together would matter, that it would leave a mark on me deeper than any regret or sorrow. In the quiet hours before dawn, I pressed my lips to her temple, memorized the steady rhythm of her heart, and let myself believe, just for a moment, that everything was possible. The days slipped through my hands like flying sand, bright and ephemeral, but I refused to close my fists. I let the memory of her fill me, warm and wild, determined to carry it home, no matter how much the world tried to wash it away. The final morning arrived with a strange sense of clarity, as if the world had been washed clean by the long, silent hours of the night. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains and settled gently on my bare skin, and for a moment I just lay there, watching the play of shadows on the ceiling, breathing in the scent of salt and sea and something faintly sweet that lingered on the sheets. My body ached with tenderness and the echo of all we had shared, but beneath it was a deeper ache, a kind of quiet emptiness, as if the tide had pulled back and revealed just how much had been swept away. The house around me was alive with movement, the familiar sounds of packing and quiet voices and suitcases being zipped closed. But I moved through it all in a kind of haze, everything muffled, every sensation wrapped in cotton and memory. She appeared in the kitchen with sleepy eyes and damp hair, her presence as familiar now as my own reflection. We moved around each other with practiced ease, pouring coffee, sharing out the last of the bread and fruit, our hands brushing with the intimacy of routine. No one seemed to notice the way we lingered in the doorway or how our eyes found each other in the mirror above the sink. I caught glimpses of her as we moved through the ritual of leaving, a sweater folded carefully into a bag, a bottle of sunscreen left behind, a shell tucked into her pocket. Each small gesture felt like an act of preservation, an attempt to hold on to something already slipping away. The drive away from the coast was quiet, the landscape unfurling in slow waves of color, dunes and grass and stretches of asphalt shimmering in the morning sun. I watched her in the rearview mirror, the wind tossing strands of hair across her cheek, her gaze turned toward the receding horizon. Every few miles she would catch my eye, offering a small, secret smile, and I found myself memorizing each one, storing them deep in my chest where I could keep them safe. My friend talked about work, about plans for autumn, about how quickly the summer had passed, but my mind wandered, drifting between past and present, the hum of the engine lulling me into a kind of reverie. I traced the line of her arm with my eyes, the freckles on her wrist, the way her fingers curled gently in her lap. I wanted to reach for her, to find her hand and anchor myself, but I held back, afraid that even the lightest touch would unravel me. When we finally arrived at my apartment, the city felt jarring and unfamiliar. The rhythm of traffic, the clatter of doors, the sharp scent of concrete and gasoline replaced the soft pulse of waves and sun-warmed skin. She helped me carry my things upstairs, her movements quiet and deliberate, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance we had found. We stood in the doorway for a long moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing in around us. I saw in her eyes the same sadness that hollowed out my own, the recognition that whatever had bloomed between us belonged to another world, a secret we would both carry in silence. After she left, the apartment felt too large and echoing, the walls holding traces of laughter and whispered confessions that faded with every passing minute. I wandered from room to room, finding small reminders of her everywhere, a coffee mug on the counter, a stray earring glinting in the bathroom light, the faint impression of her body in the sheets. I let myself move slowly, touching each object as if it could anchor me to the moments I wanted so desperately to keep. The day moved forward without me, shadows sliding across the floor, the city growing louder as afternoon stretched into evening. I tried to resume the patterns of my old life, emails, groceries, phone calls, but every action felt hollow, every word spoken at a distance. I longed for the sound of her laughter echoing through the halls, the press of her body in the dark, the easy way we fit together when no one else was watching. At night, I stood by the window, watching the lights flicker far below, my own reflection superimposed over the city. I pressed my forehead to the glass, letting the chill bite at my skin, and closed my eyes, replaying the sound of the surf, the warmth of her breath, the weight of her hand in mine. The ache inside me was sharp but clean, a mark that felt less like a wound and more like proof that I had been alive in those stolen days. In the quiet that followed, I found myself changed in subtle ways. I moved through the world with a new awareness of longing, of risk, of beauty found in unexpected places. I noticed the way sunlight spilled across my kitchen table, the softness of my own sheets, the small freedoms I had always overlooked. I caught myself smiling at strangers, laughing a little too loud, feeling a sudden urge to walk barefoot through the grass or sit outside just to watch the sky fade from blue to violet. Her absence was everywhere, but so was the memory of her, the shape of her smile, the press of her thigh against mine, the gentle certainty of her gaze. Sometimes, late at night, I would reach for the shell she had slipped into my hand on the beach, rolling its smooth surface between my fingers, letting its ridges and curves remind me of all we had shared. I would hold it close, listening to the faint hush of the ocean inside, letting its silence comfort me. The world outside moved on, indifferent and unyielding, but inside I carried the tide of our love, a quiet, persistent rhythm like the hush of waves on a lonely shore. In the stillness, I learned to live with both the emptiness and the fullness she had left behind. The story of us ended not with a dramatic farewell, but with the gentle retreat of the tide, the hush of the surf, and the promise that some kinds of love never truly disappear, no matter how quietly they are carried away.